MG, a brand that was just this side of dead not too long ago, has been making a serious resurgence. Their strategy of offering the practical, affordable electric vehicles that many people have been asking for has worked wonders for them. But if you're any kind of car enthusiast, when you hear MG, you probably don't think of an electric hatchback.
You think of a light, sexy, soft-top convertible. You know, something like this, the all-new MG Cyberster. This is MG's first new sports car in almost 30 years, and as you can tell when I put my foot down, you hear that? No, you don't. That's because this is an EV. That's right. This is the MG sports car for the electric era, and as of right now, it's one of a kind. The only soft-top EV sports car that you can get from any manufacturer. What you're wondering, though, is whether this is an MG sports car in the traditional sense. You know, charming, agile, engaging. Words you don't normally associate with modern vehicles, let alone modern electric vehicles. Well, right off the bat, there's one thing that definitely separates this thing from its ancestors, and that is speed. Old MG sports cars are many things, but fast is not really one of them. This thing, on the other hand, is frighteningly quick. The dual-motor version has 400 kilowatts and 725 newton-meters of torque. It can get to 100 kilometers per hour in just 3.2 seconds. Even the rear-motor version, which makes a more modest 220 kilowatts, is still going to embarrass any old MG sports car in a drag race. To be honest with you, though, I couldn't care less. If you haven't noticed, speed is cheap in the EV era. Throw a couple of electric motors in pretty much anything and it'll be faster than a scalded cat. What's rarer, much rarer, is the driving pleasure that comes from a truly engaging car. That, to me at least, is what old MG sports cars were really about. So, does the MG Cyberster deliver on that level? I know I just spent a bunch of time talking about how I don't really care about acceleration because it's an electric car and all electric cars are fast, but it's still worth pointing out the fact that this thing is really, really fast. Being pinned into your seat this hard does have its charms. Do I wish that that sense of acceleration was accompanied by an exhaust note of some kind? Yes, I do, but I'm not going to spend a bunch of time bemoaning that fact. This is an EV. It is what it is. Once you build up some of that phenomenal speed and then get to a corner, you need to stop, and that's accomplished via Brembo 4-piston brakes up front. This thing does have a pretty good brake feel, pretty good brake modulation. It's not overly sensitive, even when you put it into the super sport mode, accomplished by that very cool red button here on the steering wheel. So we've built up some speed, then we've hit the brakes. What happens when we throw it into a corner? Well, the steering feel is pretty good, actually. At least good by the standards of the Chinese EVs that I'm used to driving. It's not cartoonishly heavy. That tends to be one of the tactics that Chinese EVs use to make you feel like you're in a sporty car. I'm thinking about something like the Neta GT that we recently reviewed. This one does not make that mistake. The steering is heavy enough that you can really feel it, but it's not so heavy that you feel like you're driving a tanker. Turn-in is pretty good. This is not a light vehicle by any means. With a driver in it, it's close to 2 tons. Pretty heavy for a sports car of this size. It doesn't feel light on its feet that much. It feels direct when you throw it into a corner, but overall, honestly, the experience feels pretty numb. Not really surprising for a modern EV. One area where this car delivers exactly what I wanted it to was in terms of the convertible experience. I've been driving around with the window up while I'm talking to you, and that's obviously because I want to have better audio. I know, looks kind of nerdy, but I have relaxed a bit when I'm not on screen and lowered the window. Even then, the wind noise is kept under control, but you still get that nice wind in your hair feeling, even if today is, let's be honest, a little bit too hot for a convertible.
Once you've had enough sun, you can close the top and enjoy an impressively serene experience that's only emphasized by the ride. The double wishbone front suspension and multi-link rear are very well damped, easily absorbing potholes, speed bumps, and uneven pavement. The best way to put it is that the Cyberster isn't a car that begs to be driven hard on a mountain road, let alone on a racetrack. Consider it more of a convertible GT, a car built for staying comfortable on long trips that can also handle a turn or two. That might not be exactly what the MG faithful were hoping for, but it's still a tremendously enjoyable experience. Time to find out if the same can be said for the exterior and interior.
Let's start here. As if these scissor doors didn't give this away already, this is not a retro design in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't feel like MG really took any inspiration from its classic cars when penning this one. If they had, they probably would have named it something more like MGE instead of Cyberster. Cyberster sounds like a word that my grandmother would use to refer to anyone who can use the internet. But that's okay, because the Cyberster is beautiful. It doesn't just look like a sports car, it looks like a supercar. The front end is aggressive, but also kind of smiley and approachable. The rear, well, I think we can all agree that those arrow-shaped taillights are a bit goofy, but they're also pretty cool. What makes the car, though, is what's in between. It's a lithe, athletic body that looks not just good with the top down, but also the top up. The Cyberster is not a small car, or at least not as small as you might think. It's about the same size as a BMW Z4, but it's going to be kind of hard to tell that through your screen because MG's use some pretty clever design tricks. Mostly the use of black plastic, both up here on the upper part of the car and down here on the lower. What that does is visually shrink the mass of the vehicle by drawing your eyes here and not here or here.
The battery pack located underneath the passenger compartment measures either 64 or 77 kilowatt hours. Single motor models with those packs get a claimed CLTC range of 501 and 580 kilometers respectively. Dual motor models only come with the 77 kilowatt hour pack, netting them a claimed range of 520 kilometers.
So this thing is definitely a stunner on the outside. Time to get inside and see if it has an interior to match. To do that, we need to open up our electronically operated scissor doors. That is accomplished via a button right here on this kind of protruding bump on the door. At first, I didn't understand why they had to have this ugly bump, and then I noticed this. That is a radar unit that was obviously installed to make sure the thing doesn't open up into the ceiling. Hit our button here. I'll be honest. I don't love the scissor doors. I think they're heavy, unnecessary, and they wouldn't look out of place in a car show in 2003, but your mileage may vary.
Our car is a Chinese market example, so it's obviously left-hand drive, but the Cyberster will be available in right-hand drive as well.
First impressions. Well, this is not a driver's compartment. This is a cockpit. Pretty much every surface, screen, and button is tilted towards the driver. And there's a big old grab handle here that kind of increases the sense of cossetedness over here on the driver's side. It also further blocks the passenger from being able to access any of the controls here on the center console. But then again, who cares about the passenger? If they want to know what it's like to operate the air conditioning on a Cyberster, they can buy their own. The Cyberster bucks current convention by not having a single massive screen here in the center. Instead, it spreads its information across 4 separate small screens. The screen here in the center console is where you will find functions like the air conditioning, your battery settings, as well as vehicle settings. That includes your lights, your driver assistance, and a customization for your driving modes. Left of that, you have your transmission buttons. You've got park, which is push, neutral, also push, and then reverse and drive, which are kind of switches that you pull, put it back into park. Below that, you have your switch here for opening and closing your top. That can be done, by the way, in just 10 seconds. That is flanked by your switches for controlling your 2 doors. By the way, when you open these doors, you can also close them via a physical button that's mounted high up on the door, so it's easy to reach when you're standing. All the information pertinent to driving can be found on the 3 screens in front of you. Front and center is a 10.25-inch digital instrument cluster. Got a very nice kind of layout, very good UI actually. And on the left and right are two touch screens. Let's start with the one on the left. This thing has things like your trip computer, your current tire pressure. You can have performance stats up there. Then the next menu, this is the one that pops up when you turn on your adaptive cruise control with lane keep assist. Finally, you have down here, this is probably one of my favorites. This part allows you to customize the look of the little MG Cyberster that appears on your center screen on the instrument cluster here. It's very, very fun. And then finally, you have a menu here where you can turn on and off your, let's see, your auto hold. You can also change the mode for the center screen. And then you have your faux exhaust notes. You've got two choices. This, this is your fake engine noise one, and then this, future. Neither of them sound very good, so I'm going to turn that mode right off. Your third and final touchscreen can be found here to the right of the instrument cluster. This thing has your media, your navigation, Bluetooth calling, and then all of your other settings. It's a little small to be used as a navigation screen, but that's not the real problem with this 3-screen setup. The real problem is the steering wheel blocks about 40% of the left and right screens. If you put your hands on the steering wheel up here, I would say it blocks like 60%. This thing was clearly designed with a yoke steering wheel in mind, and pre-production cars were shown with yokes, but they clearly bailed on the idea. I don't know, maybe they'll introduce one later. I prefer a round steering wheel anyways, even if it does block the screens a little bit, especially when it's a steering wheel as well designed as this one. On the back, we have two paddles. Left is your regen settings, right is adjusting your driving mode. That's comfort, sport, and custom. Notice there's no eco mode on this car. On the front, you've got big physical buttons that are easy to hit and well placed. And finally, these two kind of hanging ones here. There's one on the left, the steering wheel. That one turns on your adaptive cruise control. And on the right, that's the best one. That's Super Sport. That activates the car's track mode. There is something a little funny about this thing though, and that's the fact that there is a button on the right hand here for skipping a track forward. But if you look to the left, there's no button for going back a track. MG, a company so focused on the future, they won't even let you re-listen to a song. This being a car that's better suited for nice long road trips than it is track driving, space is going to be important. When it comes to that, you've got two cup holders here in the center, which can be raised and lowered like such. You've also got a center console that's, well, not very big, to be honest. Very little storage over here, just enough for a phone. Back of the seats, actually a surprisingly large amount of space. I'm also going to point out back here, these buttons on the right and left are the physical backups for opening up the scissor doors in case you run out of electricity. And then in the middle is this kind of little hook thing. It's got a paw on it, so I assume you're supposed to put your dog's leash there so your dog can be safe and stay in the car when you guys are riding together. As for the trunk, well, as you can see, the opening is pretty well sized and it is pretty long, but it's not especially deep. I'd say there's enough space in there to put luggage for 2 people for traveling for, say, a week or so. There's a certain character to a good sports car. Call it fizz, call it charm, call it that certain je ne sais quoi that comes from connecting with a vehicle. It's a joy that's much deeper than simply being pinned to your seat by big power. Does the MG Cyberster deliver that level of joy? No, I don't think that it does. I don't think that it has that same character of old MG sports cars, light, flickable, and fun to drive. What it does have, however, is a level of power, comfort, and practicality that those cars could only dream of. And it also is, for now, the only car of its kind. And for that, I am extremely happy that this beautiful vehicle exists.